All to ODI, and today we've got the last of a series of meetings looking at what happens to the development framework after 2015. So far we've focused mainly on what you might call content issues, and we've had sessions looking at learning the lessons from progress, and then looking at some of the issues which perhaps need to be or might need to be taken into account in developing a new framework, like the fact that the urban poor tend to have been overlooked, issues to do with chronic poverty being overlooked, climate change and environmental issues perhaps needing to be a little bit better represented in the framework, and the fact that you've got two processes going on in parallel, a new development framework, a climate change framework, what is the interaction between those two? And there was another one on jobs, and that's been very much highlighted in the production of a lot of several new indicators for the current MDGs. But I think there's been a lot of talk, but perhaps not very much action on the jobs and employment front, so that was another content issue. But today we're going to focus on the process going forwards to some kind of post-2015 framework and the politics of it. And, great, Mukesh, please come in. I think, Mukesh, if you can, yes, you can get round there.
Yeah, sure.
And you'll need a chair, won't you? I'm not quite sure what happened to that.
Hello there.
Mukesh. Sorry to be late. It's Paddington Express. How are you?
Yes.
Hi.
In London, there's always somebody else to blame.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just same as development, really. You know?
Oh, is that right?
Or the
Okay. Hopefully not. So, Mukesh, I was just introducing the session very briefly. So today is on politics and processes going forwards to a new agreement. We've got three hopefully excellent speakers, distinguished people in their own fields, to lead the discussion, and I'll ask them to talk for about 15 minutes each, so we've got plenty of time for an interactive discussion afterwards. We have, I think, an audience also online, so there may be questions coming in from that audience at a certain point, and I will relay those into the discussion. We'll go in the order advertised. First of all, Amy Pollard, who is a policy officer at CAFOD, will talk about, I think, some of the thinking in CAFOD and the group of NGOs, civil society organizations, which are beginning to focus quite strongly on this. A.K. Dubé, the Chief Executive of the Secretariat of the African Decade for Persons with Disabilities, will give bring some reflections from Africa. And you're based in South Africa. I don't know if you're going to bring particular South African perspectives, or it'll be wider than that. Both. Yeah. Excellent. And then we've got Mukesh Kapila, who is Under Secretary General for the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and who's just flown in from Geneva. And I guess we're quite lucky to have you here by the sound of your London transport story.
Glad to be here.
by the skin of our teeth.
Yes, that's right.
So welcome to all of you, and I will be reasonably tough with you about timing so that we do have time for discussion. Mukesh, I don't know, do you have a presentation that you want to load? You don't, you're just going to speak. That's
no
fine.
PowerPoints. I'll provide the
no pressure,
points,
it was
and
just
the power is here.
Exactly, excellent, it's in the room. So Amy, would you like to, I think I need to give two practical statements right at the beginning. If anybody needs a toilet, there's a lady's just behind us here, and there's a gent's if you go down the corridor and round the corner. And should the fire alarm ring, there's a real risk. It's not a practice, and we simply go back out the way that you came in and down the stairs and assemble outside is the normal procedure. Amy.
Great. Well, firstly, thank you very much for coming, everybody, and thank you for having me at ODI. I thought I'd tell you a little bit today about where CAFOD has got to and where we've come from in terms of our post-MDG thinking. Secondly, tell you a bit about the Beyond 2015 campaign, which CAFOD and a number of organisations formed in November last year. And thirdly, to talk through some of the scenarios that we can envisage for how we might get to a post-2015 framework. So I'll talk you through those at the end.
Shall I do your slides?
Oh,
or are you going to do it from there?
I can do it from here.
Yeah, do it from there.
Can I? Yes, I can. So CAFOD last year did some research called 100 Voices, and we published this in March this year. It was a study which looked at what CAFOD's southern partners thought should happen after 2015. It was based on a questionnaire and a range of qualitative interviews with over 100 of CAFOD's southern partners all around the world in developing countries. We worked in English, French, Portuguese and Spanish, and the report is also available in those languages. The research questions were basically, have the MDGs been good, and what should we do next? Now, the first thing to say about this research was how enthusiastic CAFOD's partners were in terms of answering the questions. We were very pleased with the response rate we got for the questionnaire and the number of people who were prepared to be interviewed by us. And there was overwhelming support for the post-2015 framework. Like nearly 90% of our partners were saying that they wanted there to be some kind of framework for development after 2015, which I thought was a very overwhelming finding. In terms of whether the MDGs were a good thing, our partners reflected the familiar criticisms about the MDGs and all the arguments that have been made many times about their limitations. But 75% of our partners said that overall the MDGs were a good thing, despite the problems, and that the main thing that they contributed to development was making international development a higher priority in their countries, and that it was a very useful framework for advocacy and for pushing for greater action on development. In terms of what they wanted to happen next, they wanted a post-2015 framework that was developed in partnership between the North and the South. We originally had assumed perhaps that there might be a call for more Southern leadership in that discussion, but there was actually a very strong sense that they wanted to be a partnership, they wanted to be North and South working together, and that the process needed to be inclusive and participative to a much greater extent than the original MDGs had been done. There was a very strong point of consensus that a post-MDG framework needed to take better account of country contexts. And when we explored that a little bit further, there was really a sense that it was the national government level where people felt that a new framework needed to be most deeply rooted, and that maybe national government should be taking a lead to that extent. And finally, there was a priority that amongst the traditional core development concerns of health and education, poverty and hunger, that climate change and the environment would be a very core element of a new post-2015 framework. Using our qualitative data, we drew up a typology of the different perspectives that you might come across in the post-2015 discussion, because obviously it's a very complex arena where lots of people have different opinions. I won't go through them in too much detail, but basically you can see that some people like Jamal are saying let's capitalise on the post-MDG gains and be very pragmatic and use the structures we've already got. People like Valeria might be advocating very strongly for a rights-based perspective and a rights-based approach. Someone like Sister Hope might be taking quite a pragmatic view and wanting to balance the different interest groups and the different people at play. People like Rom stressing bottom-up is best. Tuma saying, are we really that sure that a framework is going to be the thing that makes the difference? We're looking for an action plan, really. And Omero, who said that international frameworks are a waste of time and that we should not necessarily assume that this is the route to power and change. So that's just to give you a sense of the variety of perspectives there. Now, I've only got 3 print copies of this report left, so I was going to save one for Ban Ki-moon, but if nobody else, if he's not in the room today, then you're obviously more than welcome to take them away. So, following on from the 100 Voices report, we discovered that there were several other organisations who we were working in partnership with, Trocare and SIDSE and Bond, who had been having similar sorts of thoughts and conversations with their partners, and we realised that there was actually a need to kickstart the conversation. And so we formed the Beyond 2015 campaign. Now, we only formally started in November, and we've really had a very strong growth over that period. While we started with, to be very truthful about it, we started as a quite UK-based, northern type focused campaign. We've expanded exponentially, really now, and we have 130 organisations involved from 50 countries, and the balance is 60% 60 in the south and 70 in the north, you might roughly speak, and we're seeing that balance get more equitable week by week. There's a huge range of organisations that are involved, from INGOs to national NGOs, academics, and a variety of networks and platforms. But what binds us all together is that we are campaigning for a global development framework of some kind after 2015, and that the process of developing that framework is inclusive, participatory, and responses to the voices of those directly affected by poverty and injustice. Collectively, we decided that a good way forward might be to think through what minimum standards of legitimacy might look like for a new framework. And to do that, we went to the World Social Forum and held a series of workshops working with civil society organisations from around the world to think through what minimum standards of legitimacy, or the must-haves for a post-2015 framework, would look like. We concluded that they must have leadership, and we're suggesting that the UN is the only legitimate and representative structure to lead a post-2015 process, that it must have substance, and that whatever the debate, whatever the framework looks like, it's got to be informed by discussions on sustainable development, aid effectiveness, and the various other processes that are ongoing. That it must have accountability, and we're stressing that the accountability might best be rooted at a national government level. And finally, that it must have legitimacy, and that's to do with the process of developing the framework in a participative and inclusive way. These are all a work in progress, and they're available on our website, beyond2015.org, so we'd really welcome your feedback on ways to improve those and take those forward in the future. Beyond 2015 are still very much developing, and so we'd really welcome you to join with us in our campaign as we go forward. Now, to move ahead to the possible scenarios that we can envisage for post-2015. The first scenario, and the one that Beyond 2015 would be really pushing for, is a clearly led, legitimate framework. And how that would work would be that the UN lead an inclusive and participative process and ratify an official framework at the UN General Assembly in 2015. And we can see some clear staging posts that might happen in that process, from Rio+20, the UN Summit in 2013, and working out the options going forward. The second scenario, I think, would be constructing a framework from the inside out, by which I mean that expert insiders, probably from within the UN, would draw up a framework of their own. Probably, if the UN was to describe some sort of broad vision for post-2015, which was quite wide, that most countries could buy into easily, and then the expert insiders distilled a new framework from that in exactly the same way as the Millennium Declaration was then distilled into the MDGs. Those experts might borrow ideas from all sorts of places, and then they would be formally incorporated into global structures. So you could do it from inside out. You could also do it from the outside in. So a coalition of outsiders from CSOs, academics, policy entrepreneurs of various kinds could develop a framework of their own and then persuade governments to accept it. So the civil society and various groups would have to decide what it was that they wanted, and collectively agree to advocate for it, and then pressure governments, probably starting with the more progressive ones and then branching outwards to adopt that as the post-2015 framework. Or, potentially, the UN could deliberately mandate civil society to take the lead on this, and so, give away their leadership of the process and mandate external agencies to lead that work. The fourth scenario, I think I'm calling a sort of new actor institutional mashup, whereby pieces of a new framework would be brokered one by one through all sorts of different forums, from the G20 to the UNFCCC. They'd be brokered one by one, possibly by small coalitions of different nations, and then stitched together piecemeal into something that might form something of a coherent framework that could then be adopted for 2015. And the final scenario is nothing, whereby the international community failed to agree on a post-2015 framework and the MDGs become a one-off initiative that doesn't have a successor. And I think that would be really a kind of symbol of the failure of international cooperation and a real low point for international diplomacy. In terms of what's actually going to happen, I think it's likely that all of those scenarios will happen to some extent, but perhaps not in a pure form. It probably won't be a linear process. We're in a very unpredictable context now, with quite low confidence and a lot more uncertainty than we had when the MDGs were being formed. And so we need to have a strategy which accounts for that uncertainty and make sure, in a context where there's an awful lot to play for, and where planning is very urgent, we're developing a resilient strategy for coping with all of that. And for me, what that means is that that we need to urgently address the need to ensure that poor people themselves and their voices are engaged and included in the debate, because in all of those scenarios there's a very high risk that poor people directly are not able to contribute to the debate. And so that's what one of the issues that CAFOD will be working on particularly over the next few years.
Thank you very much, Amy. That's very nice to have those scenarios clearly drawn out, and I think it's good to have the threat scenario in there as well, because it focuses the mind.